Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Anwar Youssef Dunbar, and this is Big Discussions 76, my original channel. First of all, please like this video, please share it, and please subscribe to my channel. Well, a couple of months ago, one of my cousins saw my content here and told me that it was, for the most part, they were, for the most part, one-way discussions. And I have had guests on here before, but I am back with a guest right now that I hold in very, very high esteem. I want to welcome on Mr. Rich Brown.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, all right. So Rich, so Rich is someone I've known for a while. We're gonna open up with that, but he's someone that I very, very much respect, and someone who I consider a brother. We don't talk as often as we should, because we're in different cities and life circumstances. But as I'll discuss as we get going, he's someone that we're just kind of operating on the same frequency whenever we talk. We can relate to certain things. We both went to HBCUs, and then we both went to PWIs for graduate school, and we're just like-minded people. And we've been talking about collaborating and just having discussions like this one we're about to have for a while now. So the time has finally come, and I'm glad you're here, man.
I'm glad we have the opportunity. One good thing about this whole shutdown is that we have opportunity to explore different parts of ourselves. So
and I think that going into this thing, when I saw this thing unfolding, that was one of my goals, was to make the best use of this time. I know a lot of people are struggling and hurting right now, but I would encourage people to try to do something constructive, try to start something you hadn't had the chance to start. I just uploaded onto my Facebook page yesterday 2 articles from my blogging platform discussing that very same thing, and it resonated with people. So we're fortunate in a way to have this time now to start this collaboration, which hopefully will be the first of many between me and Rich. So Rich, let's tell the audience a little bit about you, and about how we met. I was thinking last night, it's been about 20 years since we met.
It has.
because we originally linked up because we both wanted to go to Carabana. I was at the University of Michigan at the time, and we wanted to go to Carabana, and I couldn't find anyone to go with that particular year. And I'll always remember 2001 because that's when I blew my knee out. And I think, that was the summer, I believe, that I blew my knee out. So just a little bit about yourself. Where you from? You're from Detroit, right?
Yep. Born and raised in Detroit. Family has some pretty deep ties in the state of Louisiana. Been back in Detroit for many years. Had some pretty good experiences. You learn a lot living in the urban area. It definitely can sharpen your sword to some degree, in my opinion. Had good parents with deep Southern roots, and I think that's a big part of who I am. I think ultimately, we all want to look at our past and be better than we are the day prior. Just keep improving. So just try to be positive as I can be, and learn as much as I can, and just try to make the best of this opportunity we have. Each day is a new opportunity. So we just try to be positive and move forward.
Okay. And so did your folks come north? Like, did your father come north to work for one of the big 3?
Yes. My father came north in the mid-'60s, or actually early 60s, to work for, he came just to get out of Louisiana, just to get a job. And he worked for a while in a packing house, and that didn't quite work out. He injured himself. He couldn't meet using a sharp knife. You can hurt yourself. And he decided he wanted to work somewhere that was paying a bit better and had a lot longer trajectory. So he ended up getting a job with Ford Motor Company. And he did that job maybe 7 or 8 years before he returned back to Louisiana. He knew of my mother. They knew of each other. and he kind of, gave her his spiel, and she accepted, and she came north, and the rest is history.
Okay. So for those millennials and Gen Zers and Gen Yers and those who don't know, those who aren't familiar with Detroit, or as you once called it, the Big Motor, the Big Three, that refers to Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler?
Correct.
Chrysler, okay, yeah.
Correct.
So that's around Michigan, that's a term that's thrown around and people know what that is automatically. Yeah, so I was at the University of Michigan for about 5 to 6 years, and I think I met you in year 2. And I'm from Buffalo, which interestingly, Detroit and Buffalo aren't very far apart. And so actually, there are actually a lot of Buffalonians I'm realizing who have some kind of ties or some kind of connection over to the Detroit area. And I didn't, my family doesn't, but I recently interviewed a basketball player, one of the best high school basketball players from my area, and part of his roots were from Detroit. And so I'm saying that to say that in Ann Arbor at the time, which is only about 30 to 45 minutes away, at that time, talk of Detroit, going to Detroit was like going to a completely different world. And so a lot of people at the university really had some, what's the word I'm looking for? Some negative images of the city. Now, this was in the early 1999, early 2000s. But when I went there, it honestly just reminded me of a much bigger Buffalo. And that's one of the reasons why I chose the University of Michigan, was that it was closer to the city. So if I wanted to leave that suburbia college town thing, I could go and do that. And I enjoyed going in, and I enjoyed going to, I didn't really go to the casinos that much, but we just going down on Jefferson on some Sundays and going over, riding around Belle Isle and hanging out at Greektown and, doing different things. I enjoyed it. It really reminded me of home in some ways.
I definitely can see that. Urban areas have a certain synonymous connection. I'll be honest, I have a cousin, first cousin, 2 first cousins actually. They grew up in the Northern California area, right near Oakland. And if you go to Oakland, California, it's very similar to Detroit. So similar that rapper Sadiq, who's from Oakland, made a song about it. It's called "A Detroit Girl." He starts the song off by saying, "They say our cities are similar. If you drive around Oakland, it looks just like Detroit. You go to parts of Buffalo, it looks just like Detroit. Just the way the streets are, the way the houses are, the way people interact. There's that blue collar mentality that kind of connects us. So whether you start Western California and get to Milwaukee, Chicago, Detroit, Buffalo, you're going to Newark, New Jersey, even to some degree, you're going to see a lot of similarities. Just because of that factory, that blue collar, that opportunity lifestyle, which led people to leave the South and go to these different cities, West as well as East and North, just find a better opportunity for themselves. So there's a lot of similar connections in those places. You can go there and find something that kind of supports what you already believe, which is a good thing, I think.
Okay. Hey, Rich, one thing, your camera, you just cut off just a little bit. If you want to slide back just a little, it's up to you.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. That's better.
Okay.
So yeah, man, there are, I'm sure, one more thing, just now your head's like at the bottom. If you can kind of center it, I'm sorry.
Let me try to get this credit.
Okay.
No, but I need to sit back a little bit. Is that better?
That's perfect right there. That's perfect.
Okay, cool.
That's perfect.
All right.
There are a lot of Detroit tales or stories we can both tell. But I'll tell 2 more before we jump in. You mentioned blue collar, and I just recorded a video on for this channel about careers and how the blue collar tradesmen during this pandemic are still working. Because we need them. And one of the things that I realized when I was at the University of Michigan, because I was in school to become white collar, and a lot of the the graduate students, particularly, the males who wanted to get out and socialize sometimes and get out of our little college town bubble sometimes, one of the things some of them pointed out was, Detroit is a blue collar city. So a lot of the women there, the Black women there, don't necessarily see our value, because the guys in Detroit can graduate high school and go right to work in the plant and start making their money right away, versus us white collar guys. We have to stay in school for like 10 years, and then we don't start making money until, especially if you're doing a master's or a PhD, you don't start making your money until late in your 20s. So that was the first time I ever really thought about white collar versus blue collar. And it turns out that, not only are there different career differences, but there are also mentality differences between the two. So that was the first time I ever thought about that, was when I was there in Michigan. And the other thing, you're gonna laugh at this, is we're in this political season now, and you hear all these stereotypes about the Black cities, about the Democrat-run cities, and both of my parents had some disparaging things to say about some of our majority Black cities, and I'm not saying this to get my parents in hot water. I'm just saying this to raise overall awareness of perception and reality versus the things we're seeing in the media. My mother was afraid for me to go to Baltimore, number one, and I talked about that because I wanted to go to Morgan State at one point. But when I got accepted to the University of Michigan, and I told my father, "Yeah, Dad, I'll be going into Detroit sometimes to hang out," he said, "Be careful in killer Detroit." And I was like, "What do you mean?" "Well, that's the murder capital, of the world, and there's a lot going on there. And the craziest guy I met in the Army was from Detroit." And so, so I'm sure growing up there, you heard stereotypes about the city. You may have even seen some things, but I think it's just important that in these alternative media spaces that we share things like that. That, yeah, our families, these discussions do happen in our families, and it's not just people like the president or whomever who has negative perceptions of some of these areas.
Yeah, I think the connotation is common, is universal. But I think if you look at, our nation, you see a lot of similarities in all of our urban centers. There's usually pockets, no matter how nice the urban center is or how successful economically that center has performed, there's usually a pocket of poverty. And I think sometimes we don't understand that poverty causes a lot of these problems. Lack of access to resources, lack of education, lack of opportunity can cause a lot of these stigmas to remain alive. You also have to study and understand geographical shifts. You have to look at just how businesses set up themselves. You have to understand the way factory winds blow, not just in this country, but across the world. There's a structure to that. People who have more resources want to live north and west, away from those factory winds. People who don't have resources end up south and east, because that's usually where that bad air is. So we look at most parts of cities, even across the world, south, east, those are usually your poor communities. There are, of course, exceptions, but the vast majority of the southern and eastern portion of most urban areas across the world are usually where you find poverty, you find cheaper housing, you find lack of resources, things like that. I think a lot of times folks get emotionally charged about these things because we're fed certain things through the media. But you ever sit down and actually look at it analytically, you realize that it's a common problem and it's an age-old problem. And unfortunately, it's still that way in large spaces. I think slowly over time, things change. But overall, you still see those same concerns because it's not, politically acceptable to kind of just run people away. I mean, we see it happening in smaller pockets, but overall, you can't just say, "Hey, everyone needs to leave here. We're going to take this." And this has to be an incremental approach to kind of improve an area. But, I've always treated, all urban areas the same. I've treated all areas adjoining a major city the same because there are usually a lot of similarities. I mean, I find that there's much more in common. I think it was Maya Angelou who said, and I may butcher this, but I think she said something to the effect of, we're more alike than we are unalike. I think if we think about that, we really begin to see where we're connected. Mm-hmm. And then out of that can hopefully come some solutions.
Okay.